All right, good evening, guys. This is Charles, the Exodus Logistics Learning Center. Today is Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2024. This is a freight broker one-on-one training for beginner. Uh, Probably going to be a brief one because there's a few people coming in. I know it's the holiday week. So, iPad, I'm assuming that's you, Damien.
Yeah, Charles, that's me. How y'all doing tonight?
And all right, how are you? And then Erica. Uh, I tell you what, we'll keep this brief. If you have any questions.
Um, yeah, I got a question, Charles. I wanted to ask you, I know you said earlier, it was kind of back when we started. You said you had advanced freight broker training.
Yeah, I'm putting together one where we will work on getting customers to broker freight for, and then show the students, or if you get a customer, we will help you broker or tender those loads for them. So this training is more basic level where we show you, give you the basic steps on how to apply for your broker authority and everything that you need. But you're past that point. Now you're waiting for, you're putting your documentation together. You are uh, looking for customers, in whatever form or fashion that you are choosing. And then, but once you get a customer, what do you go from there? And that's where we segue into um, the next level of brokering, right? Once you get a customer, now what do you do? How do you keep the customer? What are the things that you need to do to satisfy and provide customer service as a freight broker? Well, if you think about it, I'm a customer. If I want to keep you as a freight broker, then I need to make sure that you do what I require, what I ask, as you tender my freight. I'm paying you a certain amount to have my goods moved from my shipping facility, my finished goods, to my customer's facility that's paying me, the shipper. Because I'm your customer as a freight broker. I'm your customer, but I have a customer too, which is the receiver. So from shipper to receiver. So you're the person who I've hired through this load tender to arrange for transportation, my goods, picking up from my facility and delivering them truckloads to my customer's facility. So that is what we're getting into next. And once you start doing that repetitively, you'll start to understand the process and the workflow of that. Because there's different requirements. Some customers require it's based off of distance, it's based off of the type of commodity, it's based off of the equipment types that's used to transport the equipment, and it's also based off of special requirements of the customer to you, the broker, in which you're going to pass on to the motor carrier. All you are doing is disseminating information between your customer and which you're getting the freight from, and the motor carrier with whom is going to be transporting that freight safely and securely.
Okay. Well, let
Okay.
me ask you this, Charles. Normally, what type of process do you normally use? Like, just say, for instance, if you're working with the customer and they ask you to send over your broker packet, how do you normally go about that? You just email it to them, or how does that process
Well,
normally?
if you are grassroots and very um, beginner, like you don't have any type of systems in place, like a TMS system, which most brokers they'll have. Well, I don't want to say most brokers, but advanced brokers or brokers who are further along in their brokering journey, as far as years of experience in doing it for a while, have what's called a TMS system, a transportation management software. And a lot of the loads that the customer has tendered to you, the broker, comes through um, the TMS system in a process called EDI, electronic data interchange. They're just transferred electronically, and that data is transferred from the system of the shipper, the customer, in through to the system, the TMS system of the broker, through an electronic process called EDI, electronic data interchange. That way, most of the data is already transferable, and then you pretty much filling in a lot of the blanks. Uh,
Okay.
you're replacing, your information. You're replacing their information with yours because you're going to be the one responsible for tendering the load or moving it, having it move, things like that. You're setting your rates, your price point, things like that. So, but if you are a brand new freight broker and you don't have a TMS system in place yet, one of the most simplest one is called Ascend. Pretty cheap, pretty inexpensive, and pretty user friendly. But if you don't have that, you can tender basically through email. You can have them send you a paper load tender, just a document saying that here's the tender, and a tender is just it's like a manifest, if you will. I'm the shipper. Let's say I'm the shipper, and I'm going to tender you. I'm just using verbiage so you can kind of get used to hearing that when you do get to a customer. Um, I want you to move some freight, so I'm going to tender you a shipment, right? So this is how they talk. I'm going
Hmm.
to tender you a shipment of goods, a truckload shipment of widgets, right? Going from Norfolk, Virginia to Atlanta, Georgia, weighing 38,000 pounds to be transferred or transported on a dry van equipment, right? So they're pretty much telling you what their requirements are. The shipment contains multiple stops, right? So you pick up, the first pickup is in Norfolk, Virginia. You know, it's loaded. There's a full truckload load of widgets coming out of Norfolk. The first stop is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then which is half the truckload. Let's say a truckload being 26 pallets, 26 standard pallets, 48 by 40 pallets. Your truckload is full. So your driver, Mr. Broker or Miss Broker, will pick up the shipment, a full truckload shipment in Norfolk, and then the first stop delivery will be half of that shipment in Charlotte, North Carolina, on X day, X amount of days, right? However long it takes to get from Norfolk, it's probably a day because it's only 5 hours, 5, 6 hours. So, and then the second and the final shipment delivery or the final segment, um, it delivers in Atlanta, Georgia, the rest of the pallets, 26 pallets. Or it could be a shipment, one truckload shipment coming out of Norfolk, Virginia, under what's called a straight through, which is just a one pick, one drop, one pickup, one drop, or what we call a one and one. So there's different types of verbiage that's used sometimes, you know, and you as a broker, you would need to know that because you need to communicate that to your carrier so that your carrier that you have onboarded to your brokerage and that you're going to be using to do the job, you know, to tender that load for you and you're paying them. So you need to know that information. So you need to, as a broker, you're in the middle of that transaction where you're getting the all the necessary information from the customer and you're conveying that necessary information with all the requirements to the carrier so that everything is done smoothly and you're in the middle of that.
Okay. Okay. You say that if you're not doing it by email, paper tender, you say that site was Ascend, like
So
ASCEND.
let me take you to that and give you an example of so in our we have can you see the screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so we have under our tools, docs, resources, TMS systems, we have several examples of them, one of which is called Ascend. Let me scroll down to Ascend. There's Alviz, there's Blue Yonder, there's Axis, Rose Rocket. These are different transportation management software. They're designed to transfer information about shipments, about carriers, about customers, about equipment, assets, loads, things like that. Everything is it's a centralized database or a CRM, customer relationship management, and a CMS, content management combination platform where all the information is centralized in one location where you can pull and disseminate and manipulate data as it relates to tendering freight. That's basically what a TMS is, transportation management software, one of which is called Ascend. Okay, here's an example. And I have an old example one, but I'll show you the user experience. I haven't upgraded this, but just to give you an idea of what it looks like inside of a TMS system, transportation management software. So when you first log into TMS systems, generally you get to what's called their dashboard, the centralized, just an overview of the site, contains some data like current fuel index on highway diesel prices right now. The US average is $3.49. and it's down from a previous week. So it was 351 or 352 the previous week. Obviously, it was down 3 cents, right? So, and it gives you a chart how to follow where the prices are, Midwest, West Coast, East Coast, and in the US in general, right? Remember, we're on the first page, the dashboard, right? So it gives you some high level information. Um, and then it gives you spot rates. Now you're looking at this as a broker. So if you're doing quoting for a customer, you're trying to quote rates, you can go to your TMS system and see, well, okay, well, what's the national spot market rates for van, flatbed, and reefer, right? And you can see that. And this is so the spot rates are the line haul with a fuel surcharge. So these are what's called all-in rates. That is an all-in rate. An all-in rate is the line haul rate plus the fuel surcharge, which is right here. So for a van right now, which is terrible, it's $2 on average, $2.02 per mile. Flatbed 237, reefers 244 is down tremendously. Usually around this time, like about COVID years, about 2 or 3 years ago, it was more so in the $3 range, $3 and something cents a mile. But right now, the rates are down. They're coming back gradually, but this is the spot market rate. What do I mean by spot market is so when tenders are rejected by large trucking companies, because that's who customers usually go after to have their freight. Tell me that if this makes sense. If I'm a customer and I got a large shipment order, would it be wise for me to target large trucking companies in my area of where the shipments are going to be coming out of? Like, for example, Norfolk, Virginia, going to Atlanta. Would it be wise for me as a shipper to go after, research any trucking company in my area for the equipment type that I need to move my freight in and go and solicit my shipments to them first before I deal with a broker?
I think it would make more sense.
Okay, so now, so then when shippers do that and they send those tenders to those large trucking companies, and those tenders are rejected because the trucking company said, well, we can't, we're a large carrier. What you sent us at what that rate, we don't want that. We reject it. So the loads still they still have a they don't have a choice, but they still have to be moved, right? So they get rejected by the large trucking company. So now the shippers say, well, let's turn to the brokers and put them in what's called the spot market. Spot market rates are the rates that the brokers are going to post on the load boards after they've eaten or after you guys have eaten into the margins of that tender amount to make your money because you still have to make your money as a broker. So here, so lo and behold, when we look at the rate index and we see the spot market rates, these are the broker rates with their margins taken off the top. So we got spot market rates and then you have contract rates. If the large carriers that the shippers had targeted firsthand accepted those load tenders, then it would have been a contract rate right here, national contract rates from the trucking companies, the contract rates, but they're spot market rates. You guys are the brokers and you've taken your money off the top and you've posted it on the load boards at these rates. So that's the difference between spot market and contract rates. Rejected tenders going to the spot market are those tenders that were rejected by the trucking companies and they have no other choice to be handed carried down to the brokers and still have them try to be moved by smaller carriers, owner operators, the little boys, so to speak. So
But normally, with the company, if they couldn't get a move out of bigger companies, they try and reach out to certain brokers. That's what you're saying.
well, they'll reach out to brokers, period, or brokers solicit.
Okay.
Yeah, they still have to get their freight moved because customers are trying to save money as well. If I'm a customer and I'm trying to get, so if I'm a customer, I'm a shipper, I'm a manufacturer, I have finished goods that a customer bought from me, a receiving company or a distributor bought from me, and they're paying me, let's say, $10,000 to move a truckload from Norfolk, Virginia to, let's say, Houston, Texas. I'm still going to try to save as much money on it as a customer to get it moved. But I'm going to go to the trucking companies first, the carriers, and say, okay, I'll give you. I know I'm getting 10,000 from the customer to get that truckload too. I'm going to tell the trucking companies, the large trucking company, I'll give you guys, let's say from Norfolk to Houston, about 1,500 miles, 1,300 miles. I'll give you 3 grand, right? Or
Mhm.
3,500, about 2,000 a mile, 250 a mile. Trucking companies are like, no, we want $3, $4 a mile, right? Because we're getting it from directly from you, Mr. Shipper, and we are a large carrier. There is no broker involved. So we don't accept that $2 and $2.50 a mile tender. So we're going to reject it. Customers say, the customer say, okay, well, I'm just going to turn to brokers now, see if I can get a broker to move it. And I'm going to tender it to them for the same $3,000. Broker say, okay, that sounds good. That's $2 a mile, but they're going to chop into it because remember, you brokers still have to make your money. You have to make your margin. So you're eating into that $3,000 tender, however much you're eating it, but you want to still give as much of the 3,000 to the carrier and still make it. If you make $50 off of each load, each shipment, $100 off each shipment, and you're giving the rest to the carrier, that's probably the better way to go. The more you eat into that same $3,000 tender, the less likely you're going to find an owner operator willing to move that freight because it's less money to them, which means less cents per mile. It's the same $3,000. It's just being uh, utilized differently as opposed directly with a trucking company. Now it's being utilized through a broker to a trucking company. So there's more hands in the pocket, you know.
Okay.
But that's how it works. Now sometimes customers are willing to negotiate and wiggle a little bit. They may say, okay, well, we seem to having trouble moving tendering this load at 3,000. Let's bump it to like 3,500 or maybe even 4,000. Now, if you bump it to 4,000, you may now have a trucking company to say yes. They may still say no. But if you bump it to 4,000, brokers are definitely going to say yeah because they can see them making their margins will be a little bit higher and they can give a little bit more money to the carriers, their owner operators they're dealing with to be motivated to move the freight. That is how the game is played.
Okay.
You just gotta once you understand the rules of the game, you'll be able to play it, right? So, but that's how it is. But this is the TMS system, Transportation Management Software. Um, this is an overview of one of the basic ones, Ascend TMS. This is the basic version. There is a premium version. In it, you have the dashboard, and then you have other things. You can have loads where any load you get from the customer, you put those loads in here.
Hmm.
You can view the loads, you can view the loads that you already have. You can search for loads that are already in your TMS system, and you may want to go back and look at a load because someone's arguing a point in a particular shipment and you had it in your system. You can go search for that load and see the details of the load to kind of bring home the point. You can view loads you already have. You can build a load. You get a new tender from a customer. This is where you put it in there manually. You under the build load. You put it in there. You put all the information you need in there, and then you save that load. And now you have a new load in there. You have LTLs. Now these loads are more full truck loads. You have LTLs. Remember I said EDI, electronic data EDI intenders right here.
Hmm.
EDI, electronic data interchange, where you can transfer. Now, in order to have an EDI connection between a shipper and a broker or between two parties, both sides have to be EDI enabled, what's called, right? And sometimes, depending on the type of TMS system, that could be an expensive process. Okay. So, customers, obviously, if you are a broker and this is your TMS system, then your customers are your shippers, right? Find new shippers. I'm gonna click that for a second, but I'll go back to that. Find new shippers. Assets. If you are an asset-based brokerage, in other words, if you have your own tractors or if you have your own trailers, because both are considered assets, then you can list them under here. Car
Okay.
Carriers will be the carriers that you have onboarded to your owner operators that you have onboarded to your brokerage. So carriers can be different from the assets. The assets could be the ones that you own. The carriers are the ones that you've onboarded to your brokerage. So that is your network of equipment right here, these two. Locations are the locations you have customers in. So your customers can be in these locations. You can group them. Rates, what are the market rates, document management. Some of this stuff is, it'll get obvious, right?
Hmm.
Account management, things like that. So your organ is basically a centralized, organized um, CRM. So
So this software right here is something you have to download and then just kind of build it out yourself as you go along and along and try to build your book of business, pretty much.
it's not a download, it's web based. So
Web based. Okay.
you go to the website, which is ascendtms.com. I'll put that in the chat. So it's a web based application, and you just purchase a subscription to it.
Okay, let me ask you this, Charles. What's included in the $24 a month package through your site?
Just continued access to me, continued process and progression in through the training, and a continued access to the back office portal. So if you decide not to continue after 90 days, then you would lose access to everything that's back here from the freight broker standpoint, all the resources and tools, and we're constantly updating stuff. So
What
as
I'm saying, would you have access to like the different load boards and stuff like that?
not through if you did not continue with the monthly subscription after 90 days, everything back here you wouldn't have access, including the load boards that we offer back here. Now you can get your since you are a broker, you can just simply purchase your own load boards because now you have an authority to do so. You have an MC and DOT. So
Hmm.
you would conceivably you would need ours, and you can consider looking at the more advanced ones like the DATs and the truck stops.
Okay, that's what you would recommend, or
I would recommend that for if you have the budget to get it. Most new brokers, may not have the budget for that. So I try to keep expenses and overhead as minimal as possible. But if you are a person who has the budget to do so, then I would say, of course, um, you know, get the better load boards with the better features so that you have a greater chance of getting a customer.
okay, okay. Yours, and you said on here, yours just not, you haven't updated it yet, right?
As far as the load boards,
Yeah.
yeah, the only one I just put these in as a I put 123 load board as a promo, and then direct freight services as a load board just to give you the experience of what a load board looks like. I didn't put it in here, and trucking planet as well. I didn't put it in there for you to like use literally um
I,
for your particular brokerage. I just put it in as a learning tool. I put trucking planet in there to actually target uh shippers in here because it has a feature that you can look up carriers, you can look up customers, shippers, and as a reference and a resource.
okay,
Okay. So,
I got you. I got you.
yep.
So I just kind of got to do the research to see how much they usually charge for these monthly subscriptions. How many? Let me ask you this, Charles. Like using multiple load boards, how many would you kind of recommend?
I would say for the budget, no more than three. And the
No more
top
than
three being a version of DAT, uh, a version of Truck Stop, which is probably Truck Stop Pro, and then 123 load board, the premium plus version of 123 load board. Those are the top three load boards out here today. DAT, dial a truck, Truck Stop, which used to be called 123. I mean, which used to be called Internet Truck Stop, and then
three.
and then 123 load board. Those are the ones that I would recommend.
Okay.
And then you have well you're a broker, so you wouldn't be able to have access to unless you're asset based and they give you on your trucking side to private load boards. Private load boards are the load boards of other brokerages. Like private load boards are the load boards of the broker's customers. So for example, if you like Coyote Logistics, right? Coyote Logistics has built or TQL or any of the big boys, CH Robinsons, they've built an internal load board theoretically from all of the customers that they are moving loads for. So
Hmm.
let's say TQL, Coyote, or CH Robinson have, let's say, 5 to 10 customers each, and those 5 to 10 customers are giving them a lot of loads, a lot of shipments. Well, they have consolidated their customers internally into their own internalized private load boards and only give access to the carriers, the owner operators that are approved and onboarded to their particular brokerage. So to access a Coyote private load board, you have to be a Coyote carrier. In other words, approved under Coyote Logistics, you know, onboarded and set up with Coyote. You have to be onboarded with Coyote. Same thing with TQL, same thing with CH Robinson. That's what they call private load boards. Only the load boards of the brokers customers, and you have to be an approved carrier of them, which makes sense. Why would I give you open up access to my private load board to someone who is not an approved carrier of my brokerage? Because then if you're interested in that load, I would have to go through the process of onboarding you first before you can move any of my customers' freight.
Hmm.
That makes so much sense to me. So
Yeah, yeah. But let me ask you this, Charles. Just say for instance, being a hazmat broker, is there any special requirements that you know of being a hazmat broker?
definitely, there's plenty of them. Number one, obviously, your carriers have to be hazmat uh, endorsed, right? Their equipment has to be a hazmat endorsed equipment with all the placard requirements, regardless of the chemical makeup of those placards or whatever, right?
Hmm.
So that's number one. They have to be educated on where to put all the documentation in the cab and all these other things. So yes, if you are going to be a broker who has a customer that requires hazmat carriers to have hazmat endorsements, then you would need to know and understand what that customer requires of that shipment from a hazmatic perspective. And they'll tell you, and you'll be educated on hazmat. Now, I would not, um, as a new brokerage, I would not consider going after customers that move hazmat goods until I've gained some experience in the process of brokering overall,
Hmm.
right? Then I will be comfortable in the transition into moving commodities that require hazmat endorsed carriers.
Okay.
That's
Now,
just that's just my advice.
okay, okay. And I appreciate that too, Charles. Let me ask you this. Have you ever thought about how do you think this will play out or what you think the process will be if you wanted to be a broker for like the medical industry, like for transportation?
Um, you can broker, so you could be a broker for any industry as long as you have a customer that has a need to have their goods, whatever those goods are, transported from their facility to their customer's facility, and they're utilizing you to provide the arrangement of the transport. So you can broker, whether it's medical, whether it's hazmat, whatever it is, as long as you get a customer that has a need for your services and you have the ability to arrange for that service to be transported,
Hmm.
then you can definitely broker. Now, it just so happens that we broker freight. So the type of freight now you first referred to hazmatic freight. Now we're referring to medical freight, medical goods like pharmaceuticals and pills and things like that, or medical equipment. So it depends on the category of the freight. Well, the category of the freight is, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it kind of is. But if the category of the freight is pharmaceuticals and the medical supplies and medical equipment, then you would just have to have the right type of carrier that handles that type of commodity. It's that simple. Once you get with the customer and find out what their need is, then you would understand what type of carrier you're going to need to transport that customer's commodities.
Hmm.
So.
It's almost, well, I could say, I remember you said early on during the training, you said it's also a good thing if you're asset based so you can eat first.
Correct. That's definitely what you want to do. So if you're an asset-based broker, let's say you got 20 assets, but it's 10 equipment. So when I say 20 assets, I mean 10 tractors and 10 trailers to match the tractors. So you got 20 assets, but 10 equipment types,
Hmm.
10 drive-ins, 10 flatbeds, 10 reefers. And you get a customer who has commodities that you can put. So if you are asset based, you already know before you go after a customer, you're already asset based. Is that fair to say? You're already an asset based brokerage before you go after a customer, right?
Hmm.
Is that fair to say?
Well, you asking me, am I asset based?
No, 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 no. I'm not saying in general. I'm just saying in general,
Oh,
if you are an asset based brokerage, it's fair to say that you have your equipment prior to you going after a customer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's fair to say. So then, would it not make sense to target customers who have commodities that go on your assets, on your equipment?
Exactly.
Okay, that's the point I want to make. So then, why would you target if you are a dry van asset-based brokerage, why would you target refrigerated commodities from a customer? It would make you're wasting your time. Well, I don't say you're wasting your time because you can just onboard reefer carriers, but you got dry van equipment. Why not first go after customers who have commodities, dry goods, and general freight that go on your dry van so you can start eating on your trucking side?
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's actually pretty good. I mean, if you got your own equipment and you broke on your own freight, I mean, you're getting basically two sources of income, pretty much.
hello. So yes, I agree.
Mm. Yeah,
That's how it works. So now you just gotta. It's basically now at this point, once you get past the basic foundational overview of what uh, brokering is,
hmm
now you're putting together your plan and your process. Now you're actually thinking the process now. Right? You're thinking it through. And what do I got to do? You know.
hmm
So and it's not that. I mean, hard. You can basically have like we're having this conversation now, right?
Uh-huh.
With let's think about it, right? We understand the process and we got our broker authority and things like that, and while we have our broker authority, we're still structuring our contracts, our broker shipper contract, our broker carrier contract, and what documents we need. We understand that. Now we are moving into the phase of getting a customer in order to now start to broker, and start to tender freight, you know.
hmm
And these are people. Now, these are not like they're people just like you. They breathe just like you. They bleed just like you and I. They put their pants on like you and I. They're just regular people who just so happen to manage um, millions of dollars or multi-million dollar commodities moving back and forth in the commerce space, in the transportation space, and you just so happen to stumble up in that space as a freight broker, and you want to provide a service of arranging to help assist them get their goods from at a decent rate where it's cheap for them and you still make your margins, get the goods from their facility, finished goods to their customer's facility. If you think about it in that perspective, then you'll be able to, it'll make you a little bit more well-rounded when you're having that conversation with them.
hmm
You say, hey, I'm in the business of arranging for the transportation of goods by customers to their customer, and I do it at a fairly inexpensive rate. If you give us an opportunity, we can pretty much prove ourselves that what we can help you in this regard. I understand you work with other transportation providers. We are a transportation provider, freight brokerage, um, and then you just go from there. And then you basically sell yourself. Now you're getting everything's about sales. From the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to sleep, you're selling something. You're selling a product or a service, whether you know it or not, right? So you just have to now really think about that, right? If you really think about that, we are selling a product or a service every time we get up, wake up in the morning, go to sleep. Whether you're having a conversation with a friend, whether you're trying to convince a child to put the pants on right, go to school, do some homework, you're selling something. So it's just now how well you do that depends on certain factors. Now you're in a space where you're selling a service of moving freight for someone who has a need to have freight moved. So now
hmm
how will you do that? Right? So if you think about it in that perspective, it kind of brings home the point now. You think about it in that perspective, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So you just have to decide where you are, where's your brokerage based as far as in proportion to, where it is in the country, and then what types of commodities move in your area. Because as a brokerage, I usually recommend starting out where your brokerage is home based, your domicile resident. Let's say you're in Chicago area. So I would target customers in Chicago where I'm within a 50-mile radius driving distance to where I can actually sit down and have a conversation with them so they can see me face to face as opposed to a phone call. Phone calls are great. Don't get me wrong. Emails are great. Don't get me wrong. But I'd rather show you I have a little bit more vested interest in helping you move your freight by showing up in person and having a meeting with you in person,
Hmm.
you know. So starting out, you know, close to the customer is a good idea rather than remotely, and then branching out later on. Obviously you're going to get customers who are beyond where you live. You may get them all over the country, but if you start out in your local area, you have an opportunity to drive to them, take them out, invite them out to lunch, give them donuts, give them little trinkets and gifts, sell yourself.
Hmm.
So, and then at some point, someone's gonna latch on to that and be like, oh man, this person's very interested in providing a service for us. We may not need them now, but there may come a time later on downstream where the people that we're using right now, the transportation providers, may do something to mess up. And then we got them in our back pocket. We can give them a call. Hey, man, I remember we went to lunch one time and you were talking about you are our transportation provider. We just had an issue that one of our trucks fell through from this other transportation provider. Do you have any trucks in the area? And boom, ding, 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 ding. That sometimes happen. Or I don't want to say something that happens all the time, actually. Sometimes a previous broker that a customer is working with, sometimes things happen and shipments fall through. There may be a hot load or a shipment fell through. They no longer work with this broker. They're not satisfied with the broker's carriers that they're using. There's no longer OTP and OTDs, on time pickup, on time deliveries. The carriers are always late and things like that, and customers get tired of that. They need because the customer's customer is complaining. Hey man, I know we've been working together for a while, but can you have your drivers deliver on time or pick up the shipment on time? It's holding up our process at our facilities. We don't have time to wait on this one carrier to end our day to get here. We want to go home or things like that. So little things like that. Some of the little things can cause some of the biggest problems. So then you come in and say, okay, well, we can kind of nip that in the bud. We have carriers who we specialize in making sure our carriers are on time. And we specialize in making sure that you don't even have that worry or won't even have that type of conversation with us as far as worrying about whether our carriers pick up your loads on time and deliver them on time.
Okay. Okay.
Things like that. So that's a form of selling yourself to reassuring to your customer that your carriers, whether they're asset based or whether they're part of your broker network, will do their job. And if you're paying your carriers a fair wage, at least above market averages cents per mile, then of course they're going to do that because they want to continue to make the money as the carriers. So you have to put all of those variables together to successfully satisfy your customer. There's a lot of intermovable parts when you are a transportation provider or a freight broker or someone who arranges for the transportation of freight. There's a lot of intermovable parts. Now you're piecemealing that together because you don't know all of them yet. And I'm not telling you all of them right now because you are learning in stages and degrees. I can't give you the advanced stuff because you have to understand the basics first. You know,
Hmm.
you'll shoot yourself in the foot, right? So it's a gradual process, and that's how it should look. That's how we all learn. You go through elementary school, middle school, high school, and then you go to secondary learning with the college, and graduate school. So it's the same process. You learn in stages and degrees.
Hmm.
So
Exactly. Exactly. Mm.
yeah,
So let me ask you this, Charles. Um, like far as I know, we talked last time about the contingent cargo coverage and all of that, errors and omissions, and I'm still kind of searching, which company I want to go with. Um, but that's not a full requirement before I can start brokering freight, being that I already got my license, right?
of course not. Of course not. It just shows the customer that you have a lot more skin in the game and vested interest in making sure and reassuring them that their goods are going to be overly protected and insured while they're being transported under your watch, under your brokerage. By
Okay.
by having that extra layer of protection, an extra layer of insurance on top of what the carrier is required to have when they are transporting the goods, which is liability and cargo, you add an extra layer with your errors and omissions and your contingent cargo on top of the carrier's cargo. So, but it's not required, but if you can if you have the budget to add that to your arsenal, if you will, your brokerage, then it would look good in the eye. If I'm a customer and I hear that, I will be reassured that, hey man, this broker has an interest in my freight getting there safely and securely and is insured. So if anything happens, I'm covered monetarily. So I will be a little bit more willing to give you an opportunity and work with you.
Yeah, because the carrier got to have what up to me. It's $1 million worth of coverage, right?
So a million liability. So in order for a carrier to have an authority, the minimum commercial liability coverage from a commercial insurance company is 750,000. But most carriers usually carry a million because most brokers are requiring a million because most brokers' customers are saying, hey, we think a million is a little bit more, a little bit better than 750,000. It's just an extra 250,000. But yes, liability a million for the carrier and cargo is 100,000 minimum. These are minimums now. There could be
Okay.
more, but these are the minimums. So 100,000 for the cargo. So yep. But yeah, you can if you have the budget, of course, again, reiterate, you can carry um the contingent cargo and the errors and omissions. And the errors and omissions, it protects the brokers more so than it does the customers because it protects you from any mistakes you make, any errors you may make while you're tendering or moving that freight, or anything you may omit. You may omit a requirement that the customer had for the carrier when they moved the freight, and then the carrier didn't do that requirement because you left it out on the rate confirmation and
Mhm.
something happened at the receiver and the shipment was rejected. So that would be the fault of the broker because if there was an omission and some type of special instruction that got ignored, and you may not have done it intentionally, unbeknownst to you. You may have done it unintentionally. You just didn't know, or this didn't happen. So that's where errors and omissions kick in. There was an error or there was an omission in the requirement. So now your insurance kicks in and covers that rejected shipment, right? Because your customer is gonna someone has to pay for any rejections and things like that. So, and the person who pays is usually the one who's at fault. In that case, it would have been the broker. Sometimes the carriers are at fault, sometimes the shippers are at fault also. So it depends on in one particular shipment, and if there's a rejection somewhere by the receiver, someone's at fault, the shipper, the carrier, or the broker. So if a shipment gets to a receiver and they open up the back door and it's damaged freight or some pallets have slid to the side or something like that, the receiver has an option either to reject the full truckload or reject only the pallets that are damaged and accept the partial and then just invoice or bill or file a claim for the parts that were rejected, the damaged commodity. So now the question becomes, if it's a claim filed, it circles back around to who's at fault in the claim. Is it the customer? Is it the broker? Or is it the carrier? So,
Hmm.
and that's a case by case basis. So we won't get into that. We'll be here all night. But but
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, Charles. What's um some of the cons? What's some of the downfalls that you see a lot that new brokers will pretty much need to be kind
So
of like
one of the major cons, one of the major things that can cause a problem as for a new broker, since we are a broker course right here, is the biggest thing is communication. You have to be a good communicator of information. You have to be a good disseminator of information because remember, you are the middleman between the customer and the driver and the motor carrier. The person who's paying you to move their freight and the person you are paying to move that person that paid you to move the freight. So, in other words, you have to be able to properly communicate or disseminate information from the customer when you are being tendered shipments. In other words, you want to get all the requirements, what the commodity is, weight, things like that, because now you got all that information. Make sure you get as much as possible. I would over saturate myself with a lot of information. And then when you produce that rate confirmation to the carrier, you want to make sure that they have all special instructions, make sure that they understand everything and that you have them certain requirements. And over time, you're going to learn with to avoid certain things too, to help you in your brokers to avoid double brokering and things like that. You want to require the carriers, hey man, Call me when you get to the shipping facility, pick up the load. I'll give you the load number then. Don't put it on the rate confirmation. Certain techniques you want to use to avoid shipments from being hijacked, to avoid double brokering. Those things come later on down the line. We'll talk about that later, but you got to be a good communicator. You have to understand how to disseminate the information and how to give the information properly to the carrier where they understand that their instructions and how to follow. That's number one. That's the biggest thing, communication.
Okay.
So, because if there's no communication, there's no understanding, right, of the requirements. If there's no understanding of requirements, and obviously mistakes are going to happen. If mistakes happen, that can lead to rejected shipments or claims being filed against the bond of the broker or a claim being filed against the insurance of the motor carrier. So, communication is key.
Hmm.
Yep, very
Now,
much.
when handling a lot, well, just say broker and freight, um, I know it kind of. Do you see a lot of claims being filed, like more so like any particular area where you think the claims are extremely high? Like, just say for instance, road
So
and
with refrigerant the high risk claims type is commodity based. So
hmm
the high risk commodity claim types are usually under the refrigerated category. A lot of refrigerated goods,
hmm
commodities, things that go on reefers because either the broker didn't get the proper information from the cold storage facility about how to, transport the freight, or they got the right information but didn't properly give it to the carrier, where the carrier didn't set their temperature on the trailer to be continuously at a certain temperature gauge, 34 degrees, 0, -5, whatever it is, based off of the commodity. So when that product trailer got to the receiving cold storage facility to be unloaded, it was spoiled or damaged, whatever, and they rejected it, right? But refrigerated goods and refrigerated freight has the highest risk of shipments being rejected and claims being filed either against the bond of a broker who's at fault or against the insurance of the motor carrier who's at fault by the receiving facility.
hmm
So, but
So
yeah,
it's
general freight and dry vans, the claims are low because there's not a potential for a lot of damages there. You strap it in pretty good. It's pretty simple. Strap it in, secure it, make sure it gets there. Uh, Same thing with flatbeds. Strap it in, tarp it, things like that. But with refrigerated goods, you got to be particularly careful of the type of goods. Like strawberries, you can look at strawberries and they'll go bad, or certain other types of cold freight that needs to be refrigerated at a certain temperature. So you got to be careful. I caution or advise new brokers to kind of stay away from refrigerated type of customers until you again get used to the process of moving shipments. Like you said, hazmat and other types of endorsement, the same thing with refrigerated goods. If you want to, broker, I would start off with general freight so you can get your feet wet with the process. Once you learn the process, then
hmm
you can advance a little bit in your brokerage by moving refrigerated commodities.
hmm
So,
Okay, okay.
all right.
I like man, it's like let me ask you this, Charles. What are some of the specific ways that a broker can track the shipments while the with the carrier while the shipment is being transported?
Well, one of the major ways is there's GPS tracking software that brokers require when you onboard carriers to this is one of the things that you put into your arsenal as a brokerage to protect your interest of your brokerage. If you onboard a carrier, make it a requirement that they need to have their locator on their phones or through their ELDs, electronic logging devices, where they can be tracked, right? One of the most popular tracking softwares that's used out there is called MacroPoint.
Ma-
MacroPoint is
Macro.
macro. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. Let's go to Google. MacroPoint by Descartes. It's out of Ohio, Independence, Ohio. It is a supply chain visibility intelligence software where you track for the carriers and for brokers and 3PLs, you can track um, your carriers in real time, satellite or otherwise, while they are in transit. Of course, there's others too now, but like Four Kites and other ones, but MacroPoint is the most manufacturer number one. And you just require them to download the app on their phone, turn their locator on, and then you can track them through the software.
Okay.
Yep, that is a so these questions you asked, they've been asked before and they've been covered. You just gotta understand because you're new, you just gotta understand, what to do and where to go. So, and that's my job. But yes, there are tracking software because you got the freight, you got the customer, you got to carry to move it. Now you want to be able to, as a broker, track and do what's called check calls. As a broker, you want to check. You want to do a check call to the carrier to see their status or what is their ETA of that shipment. Like, call me or I'm gonna call you when you get to the shipping facility to pick the load up. Or I'm gonna call you while you are check your what's your 20. Well, I'm about 200 miles from the first stop, or whatever the situation is, depending on the shipment. Or I'm gonna track you while you are in transit to see where you are, because I don't want to see you at a rest stop chilling longer than you need to, unless you're doing your reset for your hours. If you don't have the hours, then of course I understand that because we know as brokers, carriers can only drive so many hours in a day. So yes, again, this is a part of the overall process of a freight broker. You have to put all these things together and create your system. You know, get the customer, get the carrier, and then understand the process of the freight movement and tracking the freight while it's loaded on the trailer of your approved carrier is one of those process. And this software is MacroPoint is used to help you with that.
So this is just like a almost like the TMS software. You just have to pay a
It is
subscription, or is it web based?
It is web-based, but it's also app-based. So it is GPS tracking software.
Okay.
GPS, Global Positioning System. That's GPS, Global Positioning System. So it's satellite-based and it tracks movement. It pinpoints the movement. So it's as long as there is a location on and the app is installed on the phone and you have a connection with that person with the app on the phone, they can be tracked. If they turn their and then you can also penalize the driver too. Like if you turn your after we get under an agreement and you move this freight, if you turn your locator off, I'll fine you $50 because I want to make sure I'm able to track you. Or if you turn your locator off after you picked up the load and I'm trying to track you, you just voided 50% of the rate that I was going to pay you, or whatever you want to say. I'm not that now that may be too harsh, but I'm just saying
Hmm.
certain things you can kind of put in your broker carrier agreement as it relates to tracking the software, your requirements of your carriers. We require GPS tracking software on all movements, any and all movements of our freight. And you can put this in your broker carrier agreement when you're talking to the carriers. We require tracking of any and all software as our shippers require us to do so. And then basically, if you don't agree with this, then don't sign this broker carrier agreement. And if you fail to do so, it's a $25 fine or it's a certain percentage off of your rate that we were uh, contracted to pay you, right? Or something to that effect, you know. So as long as the carrier understands that they're required to be tracked, and most experienced and advanced carriers already have installed apps on their phone like MacroPoint for GPS because they know most of the brokers are going to require that anyway. So this is a common thing that goes on
Hmm.
in the industry. This is nothing new under the sun. This is just one type of tracking software, MacroPoint. In other words, there's others, right? So let's say tracking software, GPS tracking software. Let's put GPS tracking software, right? And you just right. So you got Verizon does it, but in the transportation industry, uh, MacroPoint is one. Then you got some on a vehicle level, the car level. Now we're talking about transportation as far as trucking. Let's put that in there. Trucking GPS tracking software and see what that comes up with. So Alvis has it. Alvis is a TMS system, so they have their tracking software built into, I forgot to mention that, built into the TMS. That could be a feature in in that transportation management software, the ability to track the truck while it's in transit. So some TMS systems have a tracking feature built into it. So when you're searching for TMS systems to utilize for your brokerage, maybe you can look for that tracking feature as well as a selling point in order for you to decide whether you want to purchase that TMS system. You see, so
Hmm.
there's the other one, Motive. You got I think one's called Keep Trucking, but Motive is one. I knew there was a few other. I know Macro Point. Motive is another one, a popular one. Motive. Um, I think Keep Trucking is more of the ELD. But let me type it in here just to be sure. Yeah, Keep Trucking, Keep Trucking is by Motive. That's just the alternate name of it. Keep Trucking Motive. That's ELD. But yeah, Keep Trucking is another one. So they're popular ones out here. You just got to understand where they are.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah. Uh Lytix, Geotab, Omnitrax, OnFleet, these are others. So Um, so they're there. You just gotta, the most popular one and the most common one is Macro Point. So I would look at the feature. And then I'm not sure if Macro Point is integrated or has an API integration into the TMS system. If they're number one, I can't imagine them not having that ability. So uh, so when you're searching for, you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. When you're searching for a TMS system, see if the TMS system has a GPS tracking feature built into the or integrated into the TMS software. And now
Hmm.
you're killing two birds with one stone, you're saving money. So
So basically, if we just kind of piggybacking off of all of this, from the starting process, once you're able to acquire a customer, if they award you or tender you some freight, you send it in the rate confirmation, and once all of that paperwork is straight with the through the broker carrier agreement, through the broker shipper agreement, and like I say, tender they tender you some loads, then you pretty much as a broker can load these loads to the load board, post them to the load board, and put the rate out there, kind of see what's going on with the industry average, and truckers will call you based on the pricing, pretty much.
correct. So you get a customer, they send you a load tender on the load, how much they're going to pay you.
Hmm.
And then what you pay to the carrier is transposed from the load tender that the shipper's going to pay you into what's called a rate confirmation for the carrier, minus what your margin or your profit margin, your percentage is going to be. So if a customer tenders you a $3,000 shipment that they
Hmm.
want you to move, and you say, well, I want to give the carrier 2,500 of that, that means you're going to make 500 off of that tender because the shipper shouldn't see what you're going to pay the carrier, and the carrier shouldn't see what you've gotten paid from the shipper. Right? You
Okay.
keep those two exclusive from each other, separate. So the load tender is what the shipper gives you. The rate confirmation is what you send to the carrier to sign to agree to that rate. And that rate is usually minus what you taken off the top from that tender. Let's say you took 500 off of a $3,000 tender. That means you're going to send a $2,500 rate confirmation to a carrier. Theoretically, just to give you an idea, that's the difference between a load tender and a rate confirmation. A
Okay.
load a load tender is what's given to you, what's going to be paid to you by the shipper, and a rate confirmation is what you're going to pay to the motor carrier. Now, when the carrier delivers and turns in all their paperwork, their proof of delivery and things like that, you are going to invoice the shipper for the original amount of the load tender, which is the 3,000. So once they pay you, you pay 2,500 to the carrier according to the rate confirmation agreement between you and that carrier, and you pocket the 500. Theoretically, that's just an example. Now
So
you
you said back up to where you said about the invoice, Charles.
So if a carrier, once a carrier delivers a load that you have under your brokerage, you have a carrier that you onboarded, they
Hmm.
deliver a load, they turn in proof of delivery, their POD, which
Hmm.
is first of all, when a carrier picks a load up, they're given a BOL, a bill of lading, right? Which is the manifest of the goods, what they're picking up, weight, commodity, piece count, pallet count, things like that. It's just that's just the general process. At the shipper. They get a bill of lading, BOL. Once the trailer is loaded at the shipping facility, the shipping manager there, whoever loaded it, signs the BOL in the shipping area, verifying that everything was loaded correctly, nothing damaged. The carrier may or may not sign next to them, kind of timestamp and confirming that everything was good. And then the shipper tears their copy of the BOL off. They have it in their possession as proof. Carrier leaves the shipping facility, drives, transporting the freight to the destination, right? To the receiver. They get to the receiving facility for delivery. They have a full truckload of freight they just picked up at the shipper, correct?
Hmm.
They get to the receiver for the delivery. They still have a copy of the BOL showing that they picked it up at the shipper because the shipper signed their piece and tore off a copy of it. It could be a three-layer carbon copy of it, right? Um, they get to the receiving facility. The receiving facility offloads the freight because they are receiving it. They are taking possession of it, right? So now once they offload it, check it, do a QA test, make sure nothing's damaged, no overs, shorts, or damages, make sure things are good. They're going to sign in their area on the remaining carbon copied BOL that they've received the freight in good condition. And the carrier is going to possibly sign next to their name, verifying that part. Receiver is going to tear their portion of the carbon copy off, saying that they've taken possession, they have ownership of it. The carrier has an empty trailer because everything's got offloaded. The last piece of the carbon copy is of the BOL, because that's the original BOL, but the last piece that the carrier has is a carbon copy of the signed portion by the shipper and the signed portion by the receiver. That piece turns into what's called a POD. That is the proof of delivery. They picked it up at the shipper, transported it, delivered it to the receiver. Both parties, shipper and receiver, signed that BOL. Now it's a POD. It's a proof of delivery. That is a form of an invoice that the carrier is going to use to get paid because I want to get paid now. I'm a truck driver. I did my job. I got an empty trailer and I got signed paperwork by both parties that I did my job. So now pay me, broker, because that's where I got this freight from, Mr. Broker. So I'm going to send that to you or to my factoring company. If I'm a carrier with a factoring company, I'll give it to my factoring company and just let my factoring company deal with you. If I don't have a factoring company, I'm going to send it directly to you, take a picture of it on my phone or scan it. I might go to a truck stop that may have a scanner there, scan it to you, upload it to your email or whatever. You get a copy of it, and then you just wire me the money, quick pay, however you pay me as a broker. That is the process. And I'm invoicing you not only for the line haul or the work that I did, but any extra money that's due to me, like any accessorials for detention, anything that I had to pay, like a lumper if I had to wait longer to get loaded or offloaded, anything that I need to be reimbursed for, I'm also sending in so I can get my money for that as well as a carrier. So
Okay.
that's how it works.
And that the extra costs, like the accessorial costs, that stuff need to be handled up front when you
Right.
get.
So when you first get a customer as a broker, one
Hmm.
of the questions you would ask the customers is, what is your accessorial policy when it comes to this, and this, whether it's detention, whether it's layover, whether it's tonu, whether it's lumper. And you, as a broker, you need to get that ironed out before you get under a contract or an agreement with the customer to say, hey, our accessorial, we pay $50 an hour after the first
Excuse me.
bless you. We pay $50 an hour. This is the customer talking to you, the broker.
Hmm.
When you are in that initial conversation with that customer before you sign a contract and get on a contract with them and be responsible for moving or tendering freight. You want to know what an asset, especially if you're dealing with types of commodities that have the potential to be high as it relates to accessorials. Like, you have a refrigerator stuff, you got to go to cold storage facilities, you got to wait long, so that can lead to a lot of detention time. So the risk increases. So you definitely want to ask what the accessorial policy is as it relates to detention or as it relates to tonu truck order not used. If I'm a customer and I cancel a load on you as a shipper, well, I need my driver was on their way to your facility. I need some type of tonu, truck order not used, to pay them for wasting their time, $250 or whatever the number is, 150, 250, things like that. So you want to get that covered up front. So now once you get a carrier to start moving that same customer's shipments and any accessorials occurred, when the carrier invoices me, the broker, I'm just going to transpose that invoice to the customer and say, hey, well, we are invoicing you, Mr. Customer. We're sending you the invoice for the line haul, or that what we supposed to gotten paid by you on the. We're sending you an invoice for um the tender amount, and then all the invoices that's due to the carrier for as far as tonu or any accessorials, any receipts. We're sending you a copy of the BOL so that you can see that the freight was delivered, anything like that. And the customer will pay according to the net terms that they have, 15 days, 30 days, 45 days. Now, most brokers cannot afford to wait the net terms to get paid by a customer. So that's why most brokers use factoring companies so that they can get their money a little bit quicker.
Okay.
Okay. But that is the process over and over again. The thing that changes are the players and the types of commodities and the type of equipment that's used and the different types of carriers, brokers, and shippers. But the process is always the same. Okay. A carrier, you get under a contract or an agreement with a shipper. You get a carrier under agreement with you as a broker also. So you're working with two different customers, the shipper customer type and the carrier customer type. And then you get in the process of getting a tender from the customer and then producing a rate confirmation for the carrier, a percentage of that tender to pay to the carrier, then you make your money from that. And then once the carrier does their job, delivers the freight, sends you the invoice or the POD as proof of delivery, then now the shipper has to pay you that tender amount and you pay the carrier the rate confirmation amount, and then you keep the difference. And that is what's called your margin or your profit margin. It could be 15%, it could be 20%, whatever it is of that tender. So,
Okay.
all right.
All right. Now, Charles, you say that with the 24.99 or $24 a month, we'll still have access, or just say, for instance, that we needed to call you about some stuff. I mean,
Right.
we still do that.
Everything that you're currently getting, and I mean everything that you're currently getting in the 90-day course, it will continue after 90 days if you decide to pay month to month. However, for however long you want to do that, cancel any time. So
Hmm.
you get the same level of service that you receive within the 90 days, outside of the 90 days, if you choose to pay the monthly subscription.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
See, is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to be, and we constantly try to keep our portal updated. We go through it. People go through it and look for errors and look for typos and things like that. We try to keep everything updated uh, so that everything stays current. So,
Mhm.
all right. Erica and Fisher, you guys are good. I'm assuming you guys are just listening to all the information, which is fine. Listening is a great form of communication as well. One of the better forms of communication, as a matter of fact. We don't have enough listeners in the world, but
Charles, let me ask you, what have you heard um about far as the movement of the freight since, it's just been since the longshoremen went on strike? I mean, like, what's the latest?
so we're coming out of what's called a backlog. Even that 3-day strike, if you will, between the ILA and the USMX, the International Longshoremen Association, and the United States Maritime Alliance, caused a small backlog. Even 3 days. Can you imagine if it was longer, like a month, how big the backlog would be? But backlog means that, the normal process was interrupted for 3 days. Ships come to the ports, they get offloaded, they get delivered. Well, when that stops for 3 days, it created a congestion or what we call a backlog, right? So right now we're coming out of that. We're making up the time and we're trying to get back to normalcy, right? The normal flow of the freight because it's important for freight coming into the country and the international process, freight goods coming from overseas on airplanes or vessels into the country internationally. That process um, is supposed to go smoothly. Now I mean, obviously, 3 days was not a long time, but it still caused a backlog. So we're still making up. Now, the backlog, it will cause a temporary spike in the rates because those goods that are backed up for those 3 days still need to be delivered to their customers. So the brokers or the customers themselves are going to be willing to pay just slightly a little bit higher rates to get that stuff delivered until the point where it gets back to normalcy. And then they may fluctuate back down to what the current market is dictating for the movement of that freight. But things like that, you want to stay as a broker, you want to stay updated with the different publications that we recommend. Let's see, where was that at? Broker documents, I believe, or tools and resources. Let me go back. I think I put some publications in here to kind of help you guys stay updated or stay abreast of the different things. Yeah, right here. So under tools and resources, we have different publications. Right. We have shippers list too, carriers, brokers, freight forwarders, shippers lists. These are new. These are the publications that um, we want you to kind of, and these are linked. These are hyperlinks I put in here. So all these publications. Now, some of them, a lot of this is kind of redundant information, but it relates to the whole logistics and the supply chain industry, whether it's maritime, whether it's air freight, whether it's rail, whether it's trucking, wheels to the ground. So, but the number four is pretty important. Sonar by FreightWaves. If you register with them, create an account, you can keep updated with current events in transportation. Also, number 11, Transport Dive. Number 12 is good. I'll give you some. Number two is good also. So, but I try to keep pace with everything. You even have air like Flight Radar and Flight Aware. You can see airplanes in real time in the airspace, or you can see marine traffic. You can see ocean vessels in real time on the ocean, like a traffic jam on I-10 and I-5 out in California, similar to that. So things like that, you can, stay abreast. If you're going to be in this industry, then be in the industry, right? Understand um, how things work because that puts you at an advantage, right? It just makes sense to me. If I'm going to be involved in the industry like logistics, supply chain, transportation, would it not make sense to learn as much as possible? I mean, I spend a lot of time watching news or watching sports, which is not benefiting me none whatsoever. But if I'm in an industry that's I'm trying to make money off of and have a business under, it would make more sense to understand as much as it is possible. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just speaking from a commonsensical standpoint now at this point, you know. So it's just good to know it, right? Like we read the papers every day, Wall Street Journal, I'm more business related. I read business publications, Wall Street Journal, US News and World Report, things like that, because I'm involved in, try to do financial stuff and stocks and things like that. So it's good to, again, if I decide and choose to go that direction, then why not decide and choose to stay abreast of the events in that direction? That makes sense to me. So, you know, I don't want to
You
waste time because once time goes, I can't get that back. That's something I can't get back is time.
mm, you ever just dealt with freight forwarding, Charles?
Yes, yes, I have. I got a buddy of mine who's a manager at a freight. He's a freight forwarder in Virginia Beach, Forward Air. Freight forwarders, what they do is they consolidate shipments going out in the same direction. I say overseas to the same. I say a lot of shipments are going to Europe. They consolidate those shipments, hold them in their warehouse for a while until they're ready to move, either on a vessel. They get with an NVOCC, a non-vessel owning cargo carrier, and put them in containers and ship them out around the same time to those foreign destinations. Freight forwarders, they do a lot of consolidating of shipments internationally, and it's dealing with importing and exporting in what's called global logistics. You can get a freight forwarding authority, just like you got a broker authority or a
Hmm.
carrier authority, you can get what's called an FF. So we understand MC and DOT, but there is also an FF type of authority, which is a freight forwarder, right? But you're dealing with a lot of international uh, compliance rules, trade compliance, global logistics, and international trade compliance. You're dealing with customs, border protection, which is dealing with the customs broker, because freight forwarders work with customs broker because they have to work with customs broker because if you're going to forward freight either internationally, like exported or imported, you have to deal with the customs broker in order for them to understand what you are trying to transport internationally, export or import, so that they can clear customs when they either leave the country exporting or coming into the country importing. So, as a freight forwarder, you're going to definitely have a closer relationship with a customs broker, dealing with packing lists, customs invoicing, Incoterms, all these different things that are involved in the movement of the freight globally now. So that's a different world itself. So you're dealing with that. So the governing body in that area is now the Customs Border Protection because you're crossing into international territory, either exporting or importing. So you have to deal with the Customs Border Protection on the U.S. side. Now the Canadian side they call themselves differently. In other foreign countries they call themselves differently. But here in the U.S., importing and exporting, you're dealing with the Customs Border Protection (CBP). So that's who you would, as a freight forwarder, you would have to establish a relationship with them as well as the customs brokers who handles dealing with the CBP. So,
And they broke a freight along the same lines as, just
so freight forwarders, I guess, well, customs brokers are more like brokers on an international sense, but the freight forwarders, yeah, they kind of broker freight, but it's more international. They consolidate the freight and then they move it out, and they do it on either on vessels or on the air, the either on the air cargo or ocean cargo, the vessels, the ships, or the planes, the cargo planes.
mhm.
Because freight moves internationally either by the sea or by the air or rail. You got rails going international, like from the US to Canada. They take the rail lines too. That's an international process as well. But the more common international transport process is either by air or sea.
Okay, okay. So they kind of let far as how would you? Well, I guess you would know something about how they do the rates with that. It's kind of like they when you get with a customer, they follow the kind of like the same process of sending you a load tender.
Right. So what happens is if I'm an international customer and I want to have something imported into my country from a foreign country, I get with a freight forwarder and do what's called a booking. I do what's called a booking. I let them know what my requirements are. And then the person on the other side who's going to send the goods to me, they send me what's called a customs invoice. The price of that, I have to pay that, right? And then all the other requirements, the customs invoice, the packing list, what are the Incoterms? In other words, how is it going to be shipped and how is it going to be paid for? Is it going to be FOB? Is it going to be CIF? There's different Incoterms. There's over 20 Incoterm types, right? And this is where the customs broker comes in and handles the Incoterms. They handle the packing list. They handle the customs invoice. They handle dealing with the freight forwarder. So there's a lot of intermovable parts there. You would have to understand and learn that if you're thinking about dealing with international freight movement. But the main things are the customs border protection, Incoterms, customs broker, freight forwarding. You would have to understand that importing and exporting. Uh, let's see, coming into the country by vessels, containers, you even have to deal with what's called exams. An exam in the international movement of freight is not a good thing. If your containers is going through an exam, there's different types of exams. There's vacuous exams, there's a full exam where they open up the whole container and take everything out. This is the CBP doing this now, Customs Border Protection. There's a red flag, there's a CTPAT, which is the against terrorism because of 9/11. So there's other governing bodies and agencies that gets involved. If there's a red flag, that there may be a bomb or something like that, something that's threatening, they go through it like a fine tooth comb. You got a container, a 40-foot container vessel that's going through a VACIS, VACIS exam, that means that the CBP is at the port taking that container off the vessel with a gantry crane and putting it on the ground of the deck, right? With a longshoreman opening that, breaking the seal, opening that doors, and taking everything out of that, every box, every piece of freight out of that container and inspecting it because someone said that container number has some kind of threatening terrorist or something threatening uh, to the country prior to coming into the country. So if there's an exam that's going to be given on the container number, the vessel number, things like that, that's not a good thing. So that gets a little bit deeper into the process. But this is some of the things that goes on in global logistics and the movement of the international movement of freight. So, but before, if I were you, before I even consider that, why not master first the domestic movement of freight, you know,
Hmm.
before you even venture into the uh, global movement of freight? I mean,
Yeah, I just want to get some understanding of, just some stuff, I think about later on down the line. I just want to get some kind of like some insight to, what's what with it.
yeah,
You see
no
it
problem.
listed on the site and stuff like that, but
Yeah, I definitely can talk to you about it. It's not a problem.
yeah.
Um, just understanding Incoterms, basically who are all the parties involved in the process. You know, CBP is the just like the FMCSA is the governing body on the domestic side. CBP is the governing body on the international side because freight is coming into as far as it relates to the U.S. Freight is coming into importing or leaving, exporting the country, and they are the governing body that regulates how that is done and the parties involved, customs brokers, freight forwarders, things like that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's good to have a little synopsis of, kind of like what's what, just the different aspects of the industry.
Certainly,
If I was, inquiring about that and hazmat. Um,
because you just ask yourself this question. I go to a website. Let's say I go to Alibaba.com, right? Alibaba.com is an international global website by a billionaire named, his name is Jack Ma. Jack Ma is a Japanese or Asian, I don't know what culture, but Asian, I'll say. Jack Ma. He owns Alibaba right there. Chinese business magnate and investor. This is Jack Ma. You may have seen him before.
mhm.
He owns Alibaba. Okay. There it is right there. He is the co-founder of Alibaba Group, multinational technology conglomerate. He's a billionaire. Okay. Alibaba is a large, it's like Google or like a
Am-
major a major manufacturing on an international scale when you want to order something like Amazon. He's like the Amazon of the world, if you will. Alibaba. It's a B2B commerce platform. You can order stuff globally. So I order something globally to be shipped here to America. Once I pay for it and decide how I ship it. If it needs to get here the next day. If it needs to get here the next day, it's coming on a plane, and I'm paying more for that. It's coming air cargo. It's going to get consolidated at a warehouse overseas, and then by a freight forwarder, and then loaded, drayed or dredged by a truck to the loading facility like an air cargo station or depot overseas to put on an airplane to get here quicker because I requested it like same day or next day. If I don't care how long it takes, and it's going to get put on a vessel because vessels take about a week to two to go from most foreign countries to the U.S. soil, about a 2 week process, so it doesn't really matter. But at any rate, I am interested in the process from the time that I'm the consumer in front of my computer in my home in the US somewhere, anywhere USA. I'm going to a foreign website to order a product. I'm interested in what is the logistical process once I pay for the product, from the time I pay for it to the time it gets to my front door. What is all involved in that logistical process? And that is global logistics, everything. So, we're just talking about a microcosm of that. Some of the things are involved. Now, the products still have to be, if they're not already made, if they're not already finished products, finished goods stored in a warehouse overseas, then it has to be manufactured and made and produced to a finished product and then loaded on a truck, drayed, or taken to a port loaded on either a vessel or a plane, cargo plane, and then brought over to this country's port, clear the customs. It has to clear customs leaving the country over there, and then come to our country either by a plane or a vessel and clear customs here in this country, and then get drayed to a warehouse and then last mile delivered to my front door. Okay. Now, of course, there's a lot of other intermovable parts in that process, but that's pretty much global logistics.
Hmm.
So, and the reason why we're dealing more so with global logistics, because if you remember or not, I don't know how old you are, but if you remember or not, a lot of our manufacturers have been outsourced and shipped overseas. We don't have a lot of major manufacturers in the US. They're overseas now,
Hmm.
you see. So we don't have a choice but to deal with the commerce or e-commerce on a global scale now because again, we don't have a lot of domestic US based manufacturers. So but thus concludes the global logistics lessons for this tonight.
Yeah,
But
man. Good stuff.
hopefully,
But it's
oh,
you just gotta, the array of knowledge is vast. So it's just good to, get an insight to different aspects of the business, of the brokering business. The world
it's so
broker.
much information,
Yeah.
but you want to create a mental roadmap either. So from a broker side or transportation side, you create your roadmap. Okay, how is it done domestically? Am I getting freight from a domestic manufacturer to a domestic retail store and I could go in there and purchase it as a customer, or am I dealing from a global international perspective? So you create your roadmap there. You just got to be able to think that process through and do it on a macro level first and then break it down to a micro level later on.
Hmm.
And then you'll be that's how I did it years ago. So you'll be in a better place if you do it that way. Trust me on that.
Hmm.
So but I'm always here to answer those questions, those difficult questions for you. It's not a problem. So
Okay. Okay. That's good stuff, man. It's good to know.
yes, I appreciate that. So, Erica or Fisher, any questions before we get off? I wanted to just do an hour, but we've been here an hour and a half, which is fine. We won't be here Friday. Of course, it's Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. So obviously we're gonna be with our families and things like that. So, Fridays is canceled. This Friday's canceled. So I'll have the December schedule up, probably sooner than later. Probably after the end of this week. I'll give it time. So, we'll go from there.
So you're gonna extend one class into December?
I will try to, otherwise it'll just be because of the holiday. We usually cancel classes anyway because of holidays and things like that. I may have an emergency here and there, or I'm dealing with other businesses like with the car wash now, and we're looking at laundromats and things like that. So we're trying to expand a little bit, of other sources and streams of revenue. So because, in this country, the economy is such that you gotta have multiple streams of income in order to make it. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. You just got to be able to adapt.
Hmm.
So one job is not going to help you. So
No.
especially if your lifestyle, now if you can live below your lifestyle means, then great, right? So, but yeah, the economy is not it's not fair to especially to the average employee, which is taxed the most. The average employee is taxed the most by the IRS, which is sad. So, but hey, that's another 2 hours. We'll go into that another time.
All right. All right.
All right, guys. I appreciate your time. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. My wife said that as well. She said, make sure you tell the students I say happy Thanksgiving. So my wife said happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.